The air grows thick with incense and anticipation as darkness settles over the Mekong River. Thousands of witnesses line the muddy banks, their eyes fixed on the black water that slides past like liquid obsidian. They have come from villages scattered along the Thai and Laotian border, from cities hundreds of miles away, from countries across the world. They wait in silence, broken only by whispered prayers and the rhythmic chanting of monks in saffron robes. The date is always the same, every year without fail. The final night of Wan Ok Phansa, the Buddhist festival marking the end of the rainy season retreat. October's full moon hangs low and swollen in the tropical sky. Then it happens. A sphere of reddish light emerges from beneath the surface, ascending slowly, deliberately, as if pulled by invisible strings. No splash, no sound. Just a glowing orb the size of a basketball, rising through the humid air before accelerating skyward and vanishing into the darkness hundreds of feet above. The crowd erupts in gasps and murmured blessings. Cameras flash. Phones rise in a forest of recording hands. But before anyone can process what they have witnessed, another fireball emerges. Then, another. Sometimes they come in clusters, dozens erupting from the water within minutes. Other times they arrive as solitary travelers, spaced hours apart across the long tropical night. For centuries, this phenomenon has repeated itself along a specific stretch of the Mekong River near the Thai town of Nong Khai. The locals call them Bung Phai Paya Nak, the Serpent Fireballs. According to ancient legend, they are breath-blasted from the nostrils of the Naga, a colossal serpent deity dwelling in the river's depths. The Naga, they say, celebrates the Buddha's return to earth after preaching to his mother in heaven. The fireballs are offerings, demonstrations of devotion from a creature older than human memory. But legends do not satisfy everyone who stands witness to these glowing spheres. Scientists have proposed theories involving methane gas pockets spontaneously igniting as they escape from decaying organic matter on the riverbed. Yet this explanation crumbles under scrutiny. Why only in October? Why only along this specific stretch of river? Why do the fireballs travel upward with such consistent velocity before vanishing, rather than flickering erratically like natural gas combustion? Skeptics point to military exercises conducted across the border in Laos, suggesting tracer rounds or flares launched deliberately to maintain a profitable mystery for the tourism industry. Government officials in both Thailand and Laos have issued denials, but the whispers of conspiracy persist. Eyewitness accounts describe fireballs emerging from the water's surface itself, not the riverbank where gas pockets might plausibly form. Some witnesses claim to see the water bulge upward just before each orb appears, as if something massive moves beneath. Others report a faint humming sound, barely audible above the crowd noise, resonating through the ground like the vibration of enormous vocal cords. Photographs capture luminous trails, but video footage remains frustratingly inconclusive, susceptible to accusations of fakery or misidentification. The phenomenon has been documented for generations, appearing in temple records dating back hundreds of years, long before tourism, before cameras, before anyone had reason to fabricate such a spectacle. Monks speak of witnessing the fireballs as young men, and again as ancient abbots, each year confirming the pattern holds. The elderly residents of Nong Khai remember their grandparents describing identical events, the same glowing spheres rising from the same dark waters, following rhythms tied to lunar cycles and religious calendars that predate modern science. Yet despite decades of investigation, despite researchers armed with spectrometers and underwater cameras, despite the thousands of witnesses who gather annually to observe, no definitive explanation has emerged. The Mekong keeps its secrets. The fireballs continue their annual ascent, and every October, as the full moon rises over the river's obsidian surface, people return to stand on the banks and wonder. What intelligence, if any, guides these glowing orbs? What ancient presence might inhabit the unexplored depths where the Mekong runs deepest and darkest? Or is the answer something stranger still, a natural phenomenon so rare and specific that science has yet to catch up with folklore? The witnesses watch the water and wait for answers that may never come. In the murky depths of the Mekong River, something ancient stirs. For more than a millennium, the people who have lived along its banks have whispered the same name with equal parts reverence and terror. Phaya Naga, the great serpent deity whose coils are said to stretch for miles beneath the surface, whose eyes glow with the wisdom of ages, and whose breath can summon storms that swallow entire villages. The Naga is not simply a creature of folklore. It is woven into the very fabric of existence along the Mekong, as real to the villagers as the water itself, as present as the current that pulls at their fishing boats. Temple walls throughout Thailand and Laos bear its image, carved by hands that have been dust for centuries. Stone serpents with elaborate crests guard monastery entrances, their mouths open in eternal silent roars, their bodies undulating across ancient architecture in patterns that seem to move in the corner of your eye. These are not decorative flourishes. They are warnings. They are prayers. They are acknowledgments of a power that predates the temples themselves. The Buddhist texts describe the Naga with a specificity that chills the blood. According to these scriptures, preserved on palm leaves yellowed with age and handled with trembling reverence, the great serpent possesses 7 heads, each capable of independent thought, each watching a different direction simultaneously. Its scales are said to shimmer with all the colors of the river at different times of day: the deep green of jungle shadows, the muddy brown of monsoon flooding, the golden amber of sunset reflected on still water. Some texts claim the creature can take human form, walking among villagers undetected, listening to their conversations, judging their respect for the ancient ways. Village elder Phra Somchai, a man whose wrinkled face maps 8 decades of life along the Mekong, speaks of the Naga with the certainty others reserve for the sunrise. He sits outside his weathered wooden house, overlooking the river that has defined his existence, and his voice drops to barely above a whisper when he shares what his grandfather told him, and what his grandfather's grandfather witnessed with his own eyes. According to Phra Somchai, the Naga demands respect in ways both subtle and catastrophic. A fisherman who casts his net with gratitude and humility will find it heavy with catch. A man who curses the river or boasts of conquering its waters may find his boat overturned by a current that appears from nowhere, or worse, he may simply vanish, pulled down to the serpent's underwater palace to serve out eternity as a cautionary tale. The elder describes offerings that must be made, a ritual calendar as strict as any religious observance. During certain phases of the moon, banana leaf boats filled with flowers, incense, and rice must be set adrift on the current. These are not quaint traditions for tourists to photograph. They are survival. The night Phra Somchai's cousin failed to make the offering, dismissing it as superstition after moving to the city and returning with modern ideas, his fishing boat was found the next morning, empty and drifting in circles, though the river had been perfectly calm. The cousin's body surfaced 3 days later, miles upstream from where the boat was found, against the direction of the current. There was no water in his lungs. The Buddhist connection to the Naga runs deeper than fear, intertwining with the religion's most sacred moments. According to tradition preserved for over 2,000 years, when the Buddha achieved enlightenment while meditating under the Bodhi tree, a great Naga named Mukhalindar rose from the earth to shelter him from a terrible storm, spreading its 7 heads above him like an umbrella, coiling its body beneath him to lift him above rising floodwater. This act of devotion created an eternal bond between the serpent deities and Buddhism, a connection renewed every year during the festival of Wan Ok Phansa, marking the end of Buddhist Lent. It is during this sacred time, when the full moon of the 11th lunar month rises over the Mekong, that the Naga are said to make their annual tribute to the Buddha. The fireballs that rise from the river, witnessed by thousands, documented on countless cameras yet never adequately explained, are believed by the faithful to be the Naga's breath, offerings of light and fire sent skyward in honor of the enlightened one. The timing is too precise to dismiss. Year after year, on this specific night, the phenomena occur. Western scientists propose theories about methane gas, about organic decay, about natural phosphorescence, but their explanations falter when confronted with the consistency, the timing, the sheer number of witnesses whose lives have been shaped by what they've seen. Buddhist monks in remote monasteries speak of the Naga in their teachings, not as metaphor, but as fact. Abbot Kittisak of Wat Pa Khao Temple recounts ancient manuscripts that describe the Naga kingdom beneath the Mekong as a mirror realm of palaces constructed from river pearls and sunken treasure. illuminated by bioluminescent fish that serve as living lanterns. According to these texts, the Naga possess treasures beyond human imagination, wealth accumulated over millennia from ships and villages claimed by floods. But this wealth is cursed. Anyone who seeks it, who dives with greed in their heart, joins the horde permanently, transformed into a guardian spirit, bound to protect what they sought to steal. The abbot shares a story from 1973, when a group of young men, drunk on rice, whiskey, and bravado, declared they would prove the Naga was nothing but stories told to frighten children. They delve into the river at midnight during the dark of the moon, the most dangerous time, when the Naga are said to be at their most powerful and least merciful. Villagers on the shore heard screams that cut through the darkness, sounds that were human at first, but became something else. Something that made those who heard it rush home and bar their doors. Only one of the young men emerged from the water, and he was never the same. He stopped speaking entirely for 6 months, and when words finally returned, he could only repeat the same phrase over and over. They're awake, they're awake, they're all awake down there. The archaeological evidence for Naga worship stretches back over 1,000 years, perhaps much longer. Excavations near Nong Khai have unearthed clay tablets depicting serpent deities, carbon dated to the 8th century, possibly earlier. Stone carvings found in cave systems along the Mekong show elaborate scenes of humans making offerings to multi-headed serpents, the humans carved small and prostrate, the serpents towering and magnificent. These are not the work of isolated madmen or cult followers. This was mainstream religious practice, as central to daily life as farming or marriage. Entire communities organized themselves around appeasing the river serpent, structuring their calendars, their festivals, their very identities around this relationship. What makes the Naga legend particularly unsettling is its consistency across vast geographical distances and cultural boundaries. From the highlands of Laos to the delta regions of Vietnam, from rural Thai villages to Cambodian fishing communities, the description remains remarkably similar. A massive serpent, multiple heads, association with water and wealth, demanding respect, capable of both blessing and destruction. This is not the pattern of a story that spread through trade routes or colonial contact. This suggests either a shared ancestral experience so profound it imprinted on regional culture, or the existence of something real enough that different peoples, independently, reach the same conclusions about what dwells in the river. The psychological pull of the Naga legend speaks to something primal in human consciousness. We fear what we cannot see beneath the surface. We fear depth, the unknown that exists in 3 dimensions around us when we enter water. The Naga embodies this fear perfectly. It is always below you, always watching, always waiting for the moment when respect falters, when arrogance overtakes caution. In this way, the legend serves as a perfect mechanism for survival, encoding water safety and environmental respect into religious practice. Children who grow up terrified of disrespecting the Naga are children who approach the river with appropriate caution, who understand that the Mekong gives and takes with equal ease. But there is something beyond practical survival in these stories. There is a genuine sense of the numinous, the feeling that the universe contains intelligences older and stranger than human comprehension can grasp. The villagers who leave offerings on the full moon are not simply following empty ritual. There is belief in their eyes, real faith that something receives these gifts, that their devotion is noted by a consciousness that measures time in centuries and considers human lives as brief as candle flames. During the dry season, when water levels drop dramatically, strange formations sometimes emerge from the riverbed. Long, sinuous channels carved into stone, smooth and regular, as though something massive has dragged itself along the bottom for so long that it wore the rock away. Geologists call them erosion patterns, the natural result of current and sediment over millennia. But the villagers know them as Naga paths, the routes the great serpent travels through its domain, and no one will fish near these channels, no matter how desperately they need the catch. The Mekong itself seems to encourage these beliefs. It is a river of mysteries, its depths largely unmapped, its ecosystem containing species found nowhere else on Earth. Giant catfish weighing over 600 pounds emerge from its waters, creatures that seem almost prehistoric. Freshwater stingrays the size of dining tables glide through its murky depths. If such monsters exist in documented fact, what else might exist in the places too deep and dark for nets to reach? The line between the known and unknown is thinner here than in places where every corner has been illuminated, catalogued, explained. The Naga endures because it represents something essential about humanity's relationship with the natural world. It acknowledges that we are not the dominant force, that there are places we do not control, powers we cannot command. In an age of satellites and sonar, of comprehensive mapping and scientific certainty, there is something almost refreshing about a mystery that refuses to be solved. A legend that persists despite every attempt to rationalize it away. The Naga remains in the depths, watching with 7 pairs of ancient eyes, waiting for the next offering, the next sign of respect, the next fool who thinks himself brave enough to deny what the river has always known. And the water keeps its secrets, flowing eternally toward the sea, carrying prayers and warnings in equal measure. The Mekong River runs black and silver under the October moon, and along its banks in Nong Khai, nearly 400,000 people stand shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on the dark water. The air hums with an energy that feels almost electrical, a collective breath being held. They have come from Bangkok, from small villages in Aizen, from Tokyo and London and Sydney, all drawn by the same promise. Tonight, if the stories hold true, the river will birth fire into the sky. Somchai Praser remembers the first time he saw them. It was 2003, and he had driven up from his home in Udon Thani with his wife and 2 young daughters, skeptical but curious. He tells the story now with the fervor of a convert, his weathered hands gesturing toward the heavens as if he could still summon what he witnessed that night. "We arrived just before sunset," Somchai says, his voice steady, but his eyes bright with the memory. "The riverbank was already packed with people, but we found a spot near Wat Luang. My wife had brought offerings for the Nagas, the serpent spirits that live in the river, but I thought it was all superstition, you know? Old stories to bring in tourists." Shensond. He pauses, and the silence stretches for a moment before he continues. Then, around 8 o'clock, maybe 8:15, people started pointing. At first I saw nothing, just the dark river and the lights from Laos on the other side. But then I saw it, a sphere of light, glowing pink and red, like someone had lit a piece of the sun underwater and let it float up. Then, Somchai's description matches hundreds of others collected over the years. The fireball emerged from the river's surface without a splash, without any disturbance to the water at all. It was roughly the size of a basketball, he estimates, maybe slightly larger. The color shifted as it rose, predominantly a deep reddish pink, but with hints of orange at the core. It climbed silently into the night sky, perfectly vertical, as if following an invisible wire stretched between the river and the stars. "No sound," Somchai emphasizes, shaking his head. "Nothing. When fireworks go up, you hear the whoosh, the explosion. This was completely silent, and it rose so smoothly, so steadily. 10 meters, 20 meters, 50 meters. We all just stood there watching, our necks craned back. Then, at maybe 100 meters up, it simply vanished. Not exploded, not fizzled out. Just gone, like someone flipped a switch." Nelandi. The crowd around him had erupted in gasps and applause, in prayers and exclamations. His wife was crying, her hands pressed together in a way of reverence. His daughters were jumping up and down, asking if they would see another. And they did. Over the next 2 hours, Somchai counted 17 fireballs rising from different points along the river, some appearing alone, others in clusters of 3 or 4. 15 years later, Somchai has returned every year without fail. What began as reluctant curiosity has become something close to religious devotion. He no longer questions whether the fireballs are real. He has seen them too many times, along with too many other witnesses, for doubt to find purchase. The question that haunts him now is different. What are they? Across the river, in the gathering darkness of another festival night, an Australian tourist named Claire Morrison adjusts her camera for what must be the 20th time. She is a documentary photographer, accustomed to capturing images of things she can understand and frame. But the Naga fireballs have proven frustratingly elusive. She has been here for 3 consecutive years, and while she has witnessed the phenomenon with her own eyes, her photographs have captured nothing but darkness and blur. The first year I thought it was my settings, Claire explains, her accent crisp against the musical tones of Thai conversation around her. I shoot professionally. I know how to photograph low-light situations, how to capture movement. But these things, they don't behave like anything I've ever tried to shoot before. Claire describes her first sighting in 2019 with the precision of someone trained to observe. She had positioned herself near the Sala Kewa Ku temple complex, slightly elevated from the main crowds, with a clear view of the river's bend. The festival atmosphere had been building all evening, a mixture of reverence and carnival that struck her as distinctly Thai. Monks chanted in the temples while vendors sold grilled fish and sticky rice. Children ran between the legs of adults, their faces painted with the serpent designs that honor the Nagas. Around 9 p.m. the crowd suddenly went quiet, Claire recalls. Not completely silent, but the noise level dropped dramatically. People started pointing to a spot about 200 meters downstream from where I stood. I looked through my viewfinder and saw it rising. 9-1. The fireball Claire witnessed was larger than most she has seen since, perhaps twice the size of a basketball. Its color was distinctly pink, she says, almost neon in its intensity, but somehow organic too, like bioluminescence rather than chemical combustion. Through her camera lens, she watched it ascend in a perfectly straight vertical line, and that straightness struck her as profoundly wrong, counter to everything she knew about physics and natural phenomena. Fire moves, she says. It flickers, it responds to air currents, it behaves chaotically. This thing rose like it was on rails, absolutely steady, absolute vertical, and fast, much faster than a balloon or a lantern would rise. I'd estimate it was climbing at maybe 5 to 8 meters per second. Claire held down her shutter, shooting continuously, but when she reviewed her images later that night, she found nothing. The darkness of the river, the ambient light from the crowds, the glare from the opposite bank, but no glowing orb. She has since spoken with other photographers who report the same frustrating failure. Some have captured ambiguous smudges of light, nothing more. The fireballs seem to exist in a space that resists technological documentation, performing only for the human eye. What struck Claire most forcefully, beyond the visual impossibility of what she was seeing, was the reaction of the crowd. When the fireball appeared, thousands of people responded as one organism. The collective gasp was audible even over the ambient noise. Then came the applause, the prayers, the spontaneous cries of joy and wonder. She felt it herself, that surge of something between awe and unease, the visceral response to witnessing something that should not be possible. I'm not a spiritual person, Claire says carefully. I'm a rationalist. I believe in evidence and explanation. But standing there, watching something I cannot explain behave in ways that violate my understanding of how the world works, I felt this profound disorientation. Not quite fear, but close to it. The feeling that reality is thinner than you thought, that there are layers underneath you've never suspected. Nenin Nishiwar Naparat Kai Yasit offers a different perspective. A monk at Wat Pho Chai in Nong Khai. He has been attending the festival for over 30 years, long before it became the massive tourist attraction it is today. For Naparat, the fireballs are not a mystery requiring scientific explanation, but a manifestation of the sacred, a reminder that the Mekong holds powers beyond human comprehension. The Nagas live in the river, Naparat explains, his voice calm and assured. They are ancient beings, protectors of Buddhism, guardians of hidden wisdom. Once a year, at the end of Buddhist Lent, they show themselves. The fireballs are their breath, their fire, rising in celebration and offering. Nandanawar. Naparat describes seeing the fireballs every year without exception, sometimes dozens in a single night. He has observed their patterns, their preferred locations, their timing. They appear most frequently in the deepest parts of the river, he says, where the water runs swift and cold. They tend to come in the hours after sunset, but before midnight. They appear more abundantly in years when the river runs high, when the rains have been generous. I have seen them rise very close, perhaps 20 meters from the shore, he says. When they are that near, you can see more detail. The surface of the fireball is not smooth. It seems to pulse, to shimmer. The color is most intense at the center, fading slightly toward the edges, and there is a quality to the light that is difficult to describe. It does not cast shadows the way normal light does. It illuminates nothing but itself. Kneeing. Naparat has never felt heat from the fireballs, despite their proximity. He has never smelled smoke or chemical residue. They rise and vanish without leaving any physical trace. To him, this immateriality is precisely the point. The fireballs exist at the boundary between the physical and the spiritual, visible proof that such a boundary exists. Many scientists come, he notes with a gentle smile. They bring equipment, they take measurements, they propose theories. Methane gas, they say. Phosphine from rotting vegetation. Tracer fire from Laotian soldiers across the river. But these explanations do not match what we see. Methane burns with a blue flame, not pink. Gas bubbles would be irregular, not spherical and smooth. Tracer fire would make noise and leave smoke trails. The monk's certainty is shared by thousands of local believers who return to the riverbank year after year. For them, the Naga fireballs are a known quantity, as regular and dependable as the flooding of the Mekong itself. They are part of the region's spiritual geography, woven into the fabric of local Buddhism and animist tradition. But among the tourists and first-time visitors, the atmosphere is different. There is excitement, certainly, but also skepticism, nervousness, the desire to believe wrestling with the refusal to be fooled. They crowd the riverbanks with smartphones raised, recording everything, determined to capture evidence that will withstand later scrutiny. When the fireballs appear, the shift in the crowd's energy is palpable. The chatter and laughter cut off abruptly. A wave of focused attention sweeps through hundreds of thousands of people simultaneously. Arms extend, fingers point, voices cry out in Thai, English, Japanese, French. The collective gasp is real and repeated, happening with each new fireball, as if the crowd cannot quite believe what it is seeing, even after witnessing it multiple times. Some people laugh, high nervous sounds of disbelief. Others weep, overcome by the experience. Still others stand frozen, their faces reflecting the pink glow from the sky, their expressions caught between wonder and something darker. Because there is unease in this experience, a subtle wrongness beneath the beauty. The fireballs are silent when they should roar. They are cool when they should burn. They follow straight paths when they should tumble and drift. They appear from water that shows no disturbance and vanish into air that shows no trace. Every aspect of their behavior contradicts learned expectations, creating a cognitive dissonance that the brain struggles to resolve. And there is the question of scale. This is not a handful of confused witnesses telling contradictory stories. This is hundreds of thousands of people, year after year, watching the same impossible thing. The mass sighting removes the comfort of dismissing witnesses as mistaken or unreliable. Too many eyes have seen. Too many years have passed. The phenomenon persists despite scrutiny, despite skepticism, despite the absence of satisfactory explanation. As the night deepens and the fireballs continue their silent ascension, the crowd along the Mekong exists in a state of sustained uncertainty. They are watching something real produce effects that should not be real. They are experiencing a collective mystery, bound together by shared witness to the unexplained. And in that binding, in that shared moment of confronting the impossible, something shifts. The world feels less solid, less knowable. The darkness over the river seems deeper, and the lights rising from its depths seem like messages from a reality parallel to our own, visible for just a moment before the veil closes again. In the decades following the Second World War, the strange lights of the Mekong River transformed from local folklore into an international scientific puzzle demanding answers. The Naga Fireballs had caught the attention of researchers worldwide, and what had once been dismissed as simple superstition now called out for rigorous investigation. Teams of scientists descended upon the remote villages along the Thailand-Laos border, armed with spectrometers, gas detectors, thermal cameras, and an unwavering confidence that modern science could unravel any mystery nature presented. What they discovered or rather, what they failed to discover, would challenge that confidence in ways none of them anticipated. The methane gas hypothesis emerged as the first and most promising scientific explanation. The theory seemed elegantly simple at first glance. Organic matter, decaying vegetation, animal remains, and other biological material at the bottom of the Mekong River would naturally produce methane gas through the process of anaerobic decomposition. This methane, trapped in pockets beneath the riverbed, would periodically release and rise through the water column. Upon reaching the surface and making contact with oxygen in the air, the gas would spontaneously ignite, creating the glowing orbs that witnesses had reported for centuries. The theory had the appeal of being grounded in well-understood chemistry and biological processes. After all, methane emissions from swamps and wetlands were documented phenomena. Will-o'-the-wisps, those ghostly lights seen hovering over marshlands in European folklore, had been attributed to similar methane releases. Why should the Mekong be any different? The hypothesis gained traction when researchers noted the river's ecological characteristics. The Mekong carries enormous amounts of organic sediment from its journey through multiple countries. The warm tropical climate accelerates decomposition. The conditions seemed perfect for methane production on a massive scale. Some scientists pointed to the annual flooding cycles, suggesting that the October timing of the fireballs coincided with particular water levels and temperatures that might trigger methane release. Papers were published. Conference presentations were delivered. For a brief moment, it seemed the mystery might be solved. But the methane theory began to crumble under closer scrutiny. The first problem was the remarkable consistency of the phenomenon's timing. The fireballs appeared predominantly during the Phaya Naga festival in October, year after year, with predictable regularity. Methane release from decomposing organic matter follows no such calendar. Gases build up and escape based on temperature fluctuations, pressure changes, and random variations in decomposition rate. There was no scientific mechanism that could explain why methane would wait for a specific time each year to manifest in such dramatic fashion. Nature does not observe human festivals, yet the fireballs seem to do exactly that. The second major flaw concerned the behavior of the fireballs themselves. Witnesses consistently described the orbs rising with what appeared to be controlled, deliberate motion. They ascended vertically, or at slight angles, maintaining their spherical shape and steady trajectory until disappearing from view at heights estimated between 100 and 300 meters. Burning methane behaves nothing like this. When methane gas ignites at the surface of water, it produces a brief flash, or flame, that flickers erratically, influenced by wind currents and the chaotic nature of combustion. The flame follows the gas, and methane, being lighter than air, would create an irregular dancing light source, not the smooth, purposeful ascent described by thousands of observers. The fireballs moved as though guided by some invisible intelligence, maintaining their form and direction with unsettling precision. Then there was the problem of ignition. For methane to spontaneously combust upon contact with air, conditions must be nearly perfect. The gas concentration must fall within a specific flammability range, roughly 5 to 15% in air. More importantly, there must be an ignition source. A spark, a flame, sufficient heat to trigger combustion. Methane does not simply burst into fire the moment it touches oxygen at normal atmospheric temperatures. Scientists searching for ignition sources along the river found nothing. No electrical discharges, no unusual heat signatures, no environmental factors that could reliably trigger ignition night after night. The most damning evidence against the methane hypothesis came from Japanese research teams who arrived in the late 1990s, equipped with sophisticated gas detection equipment. These scientists were thorough and methodical, setting up monitoring stations along the river during the peak fireball season. They took water samples from various depths. They analyzed the riverbed sediment for organic content and microbial activity. They deployed sensors capable of detecting even trace amounts of methane in the air above the water's surface. Their findings were unequivocal and deeply puzzling. The methane levels they measured were negligible, no higher than what one would expect from any river system. There were no unusual methane concentrations, no significant gas releases, and certainly nothing that could account for hundreds of fireballs erupting from the water. One lead researcher, speaking to journalists after publishing his findings, expressed his bewilderment plainly. The data simply did not support the methane theory. Whatever was creating the fireballs, it was not methane gas. Faced with this failure, scientists pivoted to alternative gas-based explanations. The phosphine theory emerged as the next candidate. Phosphine gas, a compound of phosphorus and hydrogen, can indeed spontaneously ignite upon contact with air. Unlike methane, phosphine requires no external ignition source. It occurs naturally when organic phosphorus compounds decay under oxygen-poor conditions, exactly the environment found in river sediments. The theory borrowed heavily from explanations for will-o'-the-wisps and ghost lights seen in graveyards and battlefields, where phosphine released from decomposing bodies was thought to create eerie luminescence. Researchers championing the phosphine hypothesis pointed to the presence of phosphorus in agricultural runoff entering the Mekong from rice paddies and farms throughout the region. They theorized that phosphorus-rich sediments accumulated on the riverbed, creating conditions for phosphine production. The gas would bubble upward, igniting spontaneously as it emerged into the oxygen-rich atmosphere, producing brief bursts of flame that witnesses perceived as glowing orbs. Yet the phosphine theory suffered from many of the same fatal flaws as its methane predecessor. The timing remained unexplained. Phosphine production, like methane, follows no festival calendar. The behavior of burning phosphine did not match witness descriptions. Phosphine combustion creates a brief, irregular flash, not sustained spherical lights that rise hundreds of meters with controlled motion. More critically, chemical analysis of air and water samples failed to detect unusual phosphine levels during fireball events. Teams stationed along the river with real-time gas monitors recorded nothing that suggested phosphine release on the scale required to produce the phenomenon. Laboratory experiments designed to replicate the fireballs proved equally frustrating. Scientists attempted to recreate the conditions of the Mekong River in controlled settings. They cultured sediment samples, adjusted oxygen and phosphorus levels, varied temperatures and pressures, trying desperately to produce spontaneous combustion that mimicked the fireballs. The experiments yielded occasional small flames and flickers, but nothing resembling the consistent, spherical lights that rose majestically from the river. The controlled ascension, the sustained glow, the remarkable uniformity of the fireballs defied replication. One frustrated researcher noted that they could not even produce a poor imitation of the phenomenon, let alone explain its full characteristic. The scientific community found itself in an uncomfortable position. Every natural gas hypothesis had been tested and found wanting. The fireballs exhibited characteristics that seemed to contradict basic principles of combustion and gas behavior. They appeared on schedule, as if responding to some unknown trigger tied to the calendar rather than to random natural processes. They moved with purpose rather than erratic chaos. They left no chemical signature that instruments could detect. They occurred in locations where gas levels were unremarkable. They resisted every attempt at laboratory recreation. This failure to explain the phenomenon scientifically did more than leave researchers puzzled. It deepened the mystery in ways that made people uncomfortable. Science thrives on reproducibility and measurable cause and effect. When nature presents something that cannot be measured, cannot be replicated, and cannot be explained by known physical processes, it challenges the very foundation of the scientific method. Some researchers began to suggest that the fireballs might result from a combination of factors, a perfect storm of conditions that science had not yet fully mapped. Others quietly wondered if there were aspects of the phenomenon that fell outside current scientific understanding entirely. The frustration extended beyond individual scientists to institutions and governments that had invested resources into solving the mystery. Tourism had grown around the fireballs, and authorities wanted definitive answers to provide visitors. Were the lights dangerous? Were they natural or manufactured? Could they be predicted or controlled? Science offered no satisfying responses to any of these questions. Each expedition returned with more data, but no coherent theory that accounted for all observed characteristics. Local villagers watched the parade of scientists with knowing patience. They had never doubted what they were seeing. For them, the failure of science to explain the Naga Fireballs only confirmed what generations had already understood. Some mysteries exist beyond the reach of instruments and equations. Some phenomena belong to realms that microscopes cannot penetrate and spectrometers cannot measure. The Phaya Naga, they insisted, did not reveal itself to those seeking chemical formulas. The great serpent answered to its own logic, followed its own calendar, and manifested according to laws that had nothing to do with methane concentrations or phosphine reactions. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, the scientific investigation of the Naga Fireballs reached a frustrating stalemate. No hypothesis survived rigorous testing. No theory explained the totality of the phenomenon. The lights continued to appear each October, indifferent to the confusion they caused among those armed with technology and training. The mystery had not been solved. If anything, it had deepened, revealing something unsettling about the limits of human knowledge and the persistence of phenomena that refuse to fit neatly into our understanding of how the world works. October 22, 2002, should have been just another night of celebration along the Mekong River. Thousands of pilgrims and tourists had gathered for the annual Naga Fireball Festival, cameras poised toward the dark waters, waiting for the mysterious glowing orbs to rise from the depths as they had for centuries. But this particular year would not end in wonder and reverence. Instead, it would ignite a controversy that threatened to tear apart not just a beloved tradition, but the diplomatic relations between two nations. The Thai television program that aired on October 27th, just 5 days after the festival, sent shockwaves through the country. ITV, one of Thailand's major independent television networks, presented what they claimed was irrefutable evidence that would finally solve the mystery of the Naga Fireballs. Their documentary segment featured hidden camera footage, military consultations, and what appeared to be smoking gun proof that the fireballs were nothing more than tracer rounds. Military flares fired deliberately from the Laotian side of the river. The program's host spoke with absolute certainty as grainy footage played across television screens throughout Thailand. The images showed what appeared to be muzzle flashes on the opposite bank, followed by glowing projectiles arcing into the sky from the riverside. Military experts brought onto the program analyzed the trajectories, the color of the flames, the pattern of appearance. Everything, they insisted, was consistent with tracer ammunition fired from rifles or light artillery. The mystery that had captivated generations was reduced to a simple trick, a deliberate deception perpetrated by Laotian soldiers for reasons the program could only speculate about. Tourism revenue, national pride, or perhaps simply an elaborate joke at Thailand's expense. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours of the broadcast, social media platforms erupted with outrage. The Thai government found itself in an impossible position, caught between scientific skepticism and national sentiment. Phone lines at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs blazed with calls demanding answers. Was Laos really mocking Thailand's sacred beliefs? Had centuries of tradition been reduced to target practice for bored soldiers? Local communities along the Nong Khai province responded with fury and grief. Village elders who had witnessed the fireballs since childhood, monks who had incorporated the phenomenon into religious ceremonies, families whose ancestors had recorded sightings dating back hundreds of years, all felt their heritage being attacked. In the town of Phon Phasae, where some of the most reliable fireball sightings occurred, residents organized protests. They carried signs demanding apologies from ITV and calling for investigations into what they termed a malicious attempt to destroy their cultural heritage. The Buddhist temples along the river became centers of resistance to this narrative. Abbot Luang Porsamporn of Wat Luang Temple spoke to gathered crowds with barely controlled anger. He recounted records from the temple's own archives, manuscripts dating back to the 1700s that described the fireballs in exacting detail. These were not modern military weapons, he insisted. These were observations made by monks who had never seen a rifle, who lived in an age when the most advanced weapon in the region was a musket that could barely fire straight, let alone produce glowing orbs that rose vertically from water. The Thai military found itself in an equally uncomfortable position. Initial responses from military spokespeople were cautious and non-committal, but as public pressure mounted, they were forced to take a stance. General Thamarak Isarankura, a retired army officer with expertise in ballistics, held a press conference that was broadcast across the nation. His analysis was methodical, and for those hoping the television program had been mistaken, deeply reassuring. Tracer rounds, the general explained, operate on specific principles of physics and chemistry. They contain a pyrotechnic composition that ignites upon firing, creating a visible trail that allows shooters to track their ammunition in flight. However, these tracers have distinctive characteristics. They burn in straight or slightly curved lines due to the ballistic trajectory of the projectile. They do not rise vertically. They do not emerge from beneath water. They do not glow with the reddish-pink hue that thousands of witnesses had described over the years. Most critically, tracer rounds leave evidence. They leave shell casings, impact points, chemical residue. If Laotian soldiers were firing hundreds of rounds into the air annually, the riverbanks would be littered with physical proof. Former soldiers who had served along the Mekong border began coming forward with their own testimony. Captain Somchai Prateep, who had been stationed at a border outpost in the 1990s, spoke to reporters with evident frustration. He had witnessed the fireballs himself during his service, watching them rise from the river while his unit was on night patrol. His men had been armed with tracer rounds. He knew exactly what they looked like when fired. What rose from the Mekong bore no resemblance to military ammunition. The fireballs moved too slowly, glowed too consistently, and appeared in locations where the trajectory from the Laotian side would have been impossible given the river's geography. Scientific experts joined the chorus of skeptics questioning the ITV documentary. Physicists pointed out that tracer rounds fired from the distances involved would be easily distinguishable from natural phenomena. The chemical composition of military tracers produces a specific color spectrum, typically green or red-orange, nothing like the reported appearance of the Naga Fireballs. Additionally, the pattern of appearances was all wrong. Military tracers could not explain sightings that occurred in broad daylight, that emerged from locations kilometers apart simultaneously, or that had been witnessed in eras before modern ammunition existed. The historical records became crucial evidence in dismantling the military theory. Researchers combed through colonial archives, finding French administrative documents from the late 1800s that mentioned the fireballs. Buddhist texts from even earlier centuries contained references that could only be describing the same phenomena. King Rama V himself had reportedly witnessed the fireballs during a royal visit to the region in 1896. Were the critics suggesting that Laotian soldiers had been maintaining this elaborate hoax for over a century, firing tracer rounds before tracer rounds had even been invented? As the controversy deepened, the political dimensions became impossible to ignore. Relations between Thailand and Laos, never entirely smooth given their complex history, grew noticeably tense. The Laotian government issued formal statements denying any military involvement in creating fake fireballs. Their Ministry of Defense called the accusations absurd and insulting, pointing out that they had no motive to perpetrate such a deception. Laotian officials noted, with barely concealed irritation, that the fireballs were part of their cultural heritage too. Communities on the Laotian side of the Mekong had their own traditions and legends about the phenomenon. Why would they conspire to fake something they themselves revered? Diplomatic channels buzzed with activity as both governments tried to contain the fallout. Tourism officials on both sides of the border watched nervously as the scandal threatened to damage the lucrative fireball festival industry. Hotel bookings for the following year's festival began to decline as international tourists questioned whether they would be traveling to witness a genuine mystery or an elaborate military prank. ITV stood by their documentary, but the network's credibility suffered as experts picked apart their evidence. Critics pointed out that the footage could have been manipulated, that the experts they consulted had conflicts of interest, that the entire program had the hallmarks of sensationalist journalism prioritizing ratings over truth. Suspicions grew that the documentary had been produced not to reveal truth, but to generate controversy and viewership. In the cutthroat world of Thai television ratings, a scandal about the Naga Fireballs would guarantee attention. Some conspiracy theorists proposed even darker explanations. Could the documentary have been commissioned by interests that wanted to discredit traditional beliefs in favor of modernization? Were there business competitors of the Nong Thai tourism industry trying to damage their rival's reputation? The speculation spiraled in every direction, creating a fog of accusation and counter-accusation that obscured any possibility of clear truth. What emerged from the chaos was a fascinating study in how communities defend their sacred narratives against modern skepticism. The 2002 scandal revealed fault lines in Thai society between urban skeptics and rural believers, between scientific rationalism and traditional faith, between those who welcomed debunking and those who saw it as cultural imperialism. The fireballs had become more than a natural phenomenon. They were a symbol of identity, a connection to ancestral wisdom, a reminder that the modern world, with all its technology and certainty, still contained mysteries. In the end, ITV issued a qualified retraction, stating that while they stood by their investigative methods, they acknowledged that the evidence was open to interpretation. The Thai and Laotian governments quietly shelved the controversy, neither side willing to let a dispute about mysterious lights damage important diplomatic and economic relationship. But the questions lingered like smoke in the night air. Had the documentary been a genuine attempt at investigation that simply got the answer wrong? Or was it a deliberate hoax designed to discredit a phenomenon that defied easy explanation? Were the fireballs natural, supernatural, or man-made? And if they were not tracer rounds fired by Laotian soldiers, then what exactly was rising from the Mekong River each October, glowing against the darkness like secrets the earth refused to keep buried? Wait. The fireballs do not follow the rules of nature, not in the way we understand them. If you speak with the scientists who first arrived at the Mekong River to explain away the Naga Fireballs, you will hear confidence in their theories. Methane gas, they said. Phosphine, perhaps. Plasma formations caused by ionized gases meeting the moisture-laden air above the water. Each explanation carried the weight of academic authority, the reassurance of rational thought applied to a mysterious phenomenon. But if you press them, if you ask them to explain the timing, you will watch that confidence fracture. Because the timing changes everything. The fireballs appear almost exclusively during the full moon of October. Not September. Not November. October. More specifically, they concentrate their appearance on the final night of Buddhist Lent, a movable feast determined by lunar cycles that shifts dates each year according to the ancient calendar. This is not a pattern that methane gas should care about. This is not a schedule that phosphine follows. The Earth's crust does not check the Buddhist calendar before releasing combustible gases into the atmosphere. In October of 1997, a team of Thai scientists positioned themselves along a 12-kilometer stretch of the river. They brought with them instruments to measure methane concentrations, barometric pressure, water temperature, and humidity. They arrived a week before the festival and stayed for a week after. For 14 days, they took readings every 6 hours. The methane levels remained consistent throughout the entire period. The water temperature varied by less than 2 degrees Celsius. The barometric pressure showed the normal fluctuations of autumn weather. Nothing in their data explained why, on the night of October 15th, they witnessed 143 fireballs rise from the water, while on the nights immediately before and after, they counted 0. 0.I. The same conditions. The same water. The same air. But no fireballs except on that single night. This pattern repeats with disturbing consistency. Dr. Manit Kamwan, a geology professor from Nakhon Phanom University, spent 6 years analyzing weather data, water levels, and fireball sighting reports from 1985 to 1991. His findings, published in a regional scientific journal that few people read, revealed something that undermined every naturalistic explanation proposed. The fireballs appeared in years of terrible drought, when the river ran low and slow, its water barely moving. They appeared in years of flooding, when the Mekong swelled to 3 times its normal width and flowed with violent current. They appeared during monsoons when rain lashed the surface, and during clear nights when not a cloud marked the sky. In 2002, Thailand experienced one of its driest years on record. The Mekong River dropped to levels not seen in 5 decades. Sandbars emerged that had been underwater for generations. Fishermen walked across sections that had been deep channels just years before. The methane theory, which depended on decaying organic matter in the riverbed releasing gas, should have failed spectacularly that year. Dry riverbeds do not produce the same methane concentrations as submerged ones. The anaerobic bacteria that create these gases require water. Yet, on October 21st, 2002, with the river at its lowest point in 50 years, thousands of witnesses watched as approximately 200 fireballs rose from the water's surface. Some emerged from sections of river so shallow that you could see the bottom, see the stones and sand beneath crystal clear water just a meter deep. The fireballs did not care about the drought. They appeared on schedule, as they always had. What disturbs researchers even more are the sightings from remote stretches of river where no human presence exists for miles in either direction. The festival zone, the areas around Nong Khai and Phong Phi, these receive attention because of the crowds. But local boatmen and fishermen who work the river year-round tell different stories. They describe witnessing fireballs in isolated areas 50 kilometers north of the festival sites, in sections of river that cut through dense jungle where no roads reach. Places where the nearest village lies hours away by boat. In 1993, a fisherman named Somchai Ratanakosan was checking his nets near the Laotian border in waters that rarely see traffic. It was 2 a.m. on October 9th. He had no idea what day Buddhist Lent ended. He did not follow the religious calendar closely. He was simply working, alone, in his small boat, when he saw them. 7 fireballs rose from the water within 10 minutes, each one glowing with that distinctive reddish-orange light, each one ascending silently into the darkness before disappearing. He was so shaken that he abandoned his nets and motored back to his village, arriving at dawn to tell anyone who would listen. Most people dismissed his story. The timing was wrong. It was not the festival night. But Somchai insisted on what he had seen, and he never returned to that section of river after dark. His experience was not unique. Records maintained by monks at Wat Luang, a monastery that has stood beside the Mekong for over 300 years, contain references to off-season sighting. These are rare, mentioned perhaps once every 5 or 10 years, but they follow a pattern that makes them difficult to ignore. The off-season fireballs appear during full moons. Not every full moon, but always during a full moon. Never during any other phase. And they appear most frequently during months when the river undergoes significant change, either rising rapidly due to upstream rainfall or falling during drought. In April of 2008, during the Songkran Festival when Thailand celebrates its traditional New Year, a group of university students camping along the river near Pak Chom district witnessed fireballs at approximately 11 at night. They had been drinking, which skeptics would later use to dismiss their testimony, but all 6 students told the same story with the same details. The fireballs emerged from a quiet eddy where the current slowed. 5 in total, spaced about 3 minutes apart. The students had their phones, but in their shock in the darkness, they captured nothing useful on video. Just shaky footage of lights that could have been anything. But they all agreed on what they saw with their eyes, and none of them could explain it. What makes these off-season sightings particularly strange is that they occur without the crowd effect, without the expectation and anticipation that skeptics blame for mass hallucination during the festival. These witnesses were not expecting to see fireballs. Most had never heard of them appearing outside of October. They were simply in the wrong place at the right time, or perhaps the right place at the wrong time, depending on your perspective. Then there are the electromagnetic anomalies. In 2007, a Thai research team brought equipment typically used to study lightning phenomena. They set up monitoring stations at 3 points along the river, creating a triangulated observation field. What they discovered added another layer to the mystery. In the 3 hours leading up to the peak fireball activity on the festival night, their instruments detected unusual electromagnetic fluctuations. The readings showed spikes in the local magnetic field, brief but distinct variations that had no obvious source. These were not caused by the electrical generators that power the festival lights. The team had accounted for that. These were coming from the river itself, or from somewhere beneath it. Dr. Suthep Nawinich, who led that research effort, described the readings as similar to what you might detect before certain types of earthquake activity, except there were no earthquakes. The seismographs showed nothing. The electromagnetic disturbances appeared, the fireballs rose, and then the readings returned to normal. When questioned about what could cause such a pattern, Dr. Suthep offered no theories. He simply stated that the data showed something was happening in that location that did not match any natural phenomenon he had studied in 30 years of geophysics research. Other teams have detected temperature anomalies. Thermal imaging cameras pointed at the water surface have recorded cold spots, areas where the temperature drops by 5 or 6 degrees Celsius in a radius of just a few meters. These cold spots appear minutes before fireballs emerge from those exact locations. This is the opposite of what you would expect if rising gas were the cause. Methane or phosphine bubbling to the surface should create warm spots, not cold ones. The gas would be warmer than the water, having risen from the riverbed. But the thermal cameras show cooling, not heating, immediately before the fireballs appear. In 2013, a Japanese documentary crew brought sophisticated gas analysis equipment to Dal. They wanted to settle the methane question definitively. For 3 days before the festival, they took continuous air samples above the river. They measured methane, phosphine, hydrogen sulfide, and a dozen other potentially flammable gases. Their equipment was sensitive enough to detect parts per billion. During the festival night, they maintained their monitoring while the fireballs rose all around them. Later, analysis of their samples showed no significant increase in any flammable gas concentration at the moments when fireballs appeared just meters from their sampling equipment. The air was clean. Whatever was burning, it was not leaving a chemical signature they could detect. This finding was not published widely. It appeared in a Japanese scientific journal that few people in Thailand had access to. The researchers seemed reluctant to push their conclusions too forcefully, perhaps understanding that negative results, findings that show what something is not rather than what it is, rarely generate the attention that positive explanations receive. The more data that accumulates, the less sense any of it makes. Each scientific expedition arrives confident that modern instruments and methodologies will crack the mystery. Each one leaves with more questions than answers. The fireballs do not behave like gas combustion. They do not follow weather patterns. They ignore water levels and seasonal variations. They appear on a schedule determined by a human religious calendar, as if the phenomenon somehow knows when Buddhist Lent ends, as if it has been keeping this appointment for centuries, rising from the depths on command. Some researchers have begun to whisper about possibilities they would never commit to paper. Could there be something about the human presence itself that triggers the phenomenon? Does the gathering of thousands of people, all focused on the river, all expecting to witness something extraordinary, somehow create the conditions necessary for the fireballs to appear? This ventures into territory that makes scientists uncomfortable, suggesting that consciousness or collective belief might influence physical reality. But the off-season sightings undermine even this explanation. Those witnesses were alone, or in tiny groups, with no expectation and no focused attention. Yet, they saw the fireballs anyway. The pattern that emerges from decades of sightings, measurements, and failed explanations points toward a conclusion that seems impossible. The Naga Fireballs do not fit into our understanding of how the natural world works. They appear when they should not. They burn without fuel. They rise from water that shows no sign of releasing them. They follow a calendar they should have no awareness of. They have been witnessed by thousands of people, photographed, filmed, and studied, yet they remain unexplained. And perhaps most disturbing of all, they continue. Year after year. Full moon after full moon. October after October. Rising from the Mekong River in defiance of every theory we construct to contain them. The Mekong River stretches for over 4,000 kilometers through 6 countries, a serpentine artery of water that carries secrets along its muddy current. For decades, the world has focused on one small stretch near Nong Khai in Thailand, where thousands gather each October to witness the Naga Fireballs rise from the depth. But that celebrated festival site is only a single point on a vast map of mystery. The phenomenon does not begin or end at the temple grounds where tourists snap photographs and vendors sell souvenirs. Instead, it extends across hundreds of kilometers of river, appearing in remote villages where no cameras wait and no crowds gather to celebrate. In northern Laos, along a stretch of the Mekong that flows past villages accessible only by boat, an elderly woman named Baunmi has watched the fireballs rise from the water every year since she was a child. She sits on the riverbank each autumn evening, waiting for the lights she has known her entire life. There is no festival here, no monks blessing the waters, no electricity to light the village paths. Just the river, the jungle darkness, and the glowing orbs that emerge without sound or warning. Baunmi's grandmother saw them. Her great-grandmother saw them. The phenomenon predates the modern festival by generations, existing in these quiet places where tradition is oral and observation is private. A fisherman named Samchai reported an encounter that haunts everyone who hears it. He had been fishing at midnight, far from any village, where the Mekong widens into a dark expanse reflecting nothing but stars. The night was windless, the waters smooth as black glass. He was checking his nets when he noticed a glow beneath his wooden boat. Not the reflected light of his lantern, but something deeper, something rising from below. At first, he thought it might be phosphorescent algae, or perhaps the reflection of the moon, though the moon was barely a sliver that night. Then he saw another glow, and another, surrounding his small vessel in a circle of underwater light. Samchai described the sensation of being watched, of something intelligent acknowledging his presence. The glowing orbs beneath the surface pulsed gently, moving in slow spirals around his boat. He could see them clearly through the murky water, each one about the size of a human head, emanating a red-orange light that seemed to come from within rather than being reflected from any external source. His hands froze on the nets. The practical part of his mind told him to row for shore, but fear and fascination held him motionless. Then the first orb broke the surface. It emerged without splash or sound, rising smoothly from the water as if ascending an invisible track. The glowing sphere hovered for 3 heartbeats at the waterline before continuing its journey upward into the darkness above. A second orb followed, then a third, then more than Samchai could count. They rose all around his boat in a luminous curtain, silent and serene, each one climbing perhaps 50 meters before winking out of existence. He sat in his boat for 20 minutes, surrounded by rising lights, too terrified to move and too mesmerized to look away. When Samchai finally made it back to his village 3 hours before dawn, his hands were still shaking. He told his story to neighbors who nodded with recognition rather than skepticism. This was not the first time. This was not even unusual. The fireballs appeared throughout the year along this stretch of river, far from the festival grounds that tourists knew. They rose on random nights, witnessed only by fishermen and insomniacs, occurring without pattern or warning. Similar accounts emerge from villages scattered along the Mekong's length through Cambodia. Near the town of Stung Treng, where the river swells wide and powerful, locals speak of the lights with casual familiarity. They call them by different names, each language adding its own flavor to the description, but the phenomenon remains consistent. Glowing orbs rising from water, silent and unexplained, appearing to those who spend their lives on the river, rather than those who come seeking spectacle. A Vietnamese fisherman working the Delta region, hundreds of kilometers from the Thai festival site, photographed similar lights rising from the water in 2019. He had not heard of the Naga Fireballs, knew nothing of the legends, or the annual gathering in Thailand. To him, these were simply strange lights his father and grandfather had warned him about, phenomena considered normal in the quiet understanding of river people. His photographs show the same characteristic red-orange glow, the same smooth ascent, the same mysterious appearance that defines the fireballs at Nong Khai. In Myanmar, along the sections of the Mekong that flow through remote jungle regions, village elders maintain their own traditions surrounding the lights. They do not associate them with the Naga, the mythical serpent of Thai and Lao tradition, but instead connect them to river spirits specific to their own cultural heritage. Yet, the descriptions match precisely. Glowing spheres emerging from deep water, rising silently into the night sky, appearing most frequently during the dry season when the river runs low and calm. What emerges from these scattered reports is a phenomenon far more extensive than previously understood. The Naga Fireballs are not confined to a single celebrated location. They represent something that occurs across vast geographic distances, witnessed independently by communities separated by language, culture, and hundreds of kilometers of river. This geographic spread transforms the mystery from a local curiosity into something demanding broader explanation. Consider what this means. If the fireballs were simply the result of igniting marsh gas, as some scientists suggest, why would this specific phenomenon appear so consistently across such vast distances? Methane deposits exist in rivers worldwide, yet reports of glowing orbs rising from water remain concentrated along the Mekong. The river itself becomes the common factor, the single thread connecting disparate sightings across multiple nations. The fact that these remote sightings go unreported to authorities reveals another layer of the mystery. To the people who witness them regularly, The fireballs are simply part of life on the river, no more remarkable than monsoon rains or seasonal flooding. They lack the vocabulary or inclination to file official reports. These phenomena exist in the realm of lived experience rather than documented science, known intimately by those who share the river with them, but invisible to external researchers. This creates a peculiar situation where the phenomenon is simultaneously well-known and deeply mysterious. Ask a fisherman who works the Mekong north of Vientiane, and he will likely tell you about the lights with the same casual certainty he brings to describing fish migrations or weather patterns. Ask a scientist in Bangkok or Hanoi, and you will encounter skepticism and demands for empirical evidence. The knowledge gap exists not because witnesses are unreliable, but because the phenomenon refuses to perform on command, for researchers with equipment and funding. The underwater appearance of the orbs, reported by multiple witnesses across different regions, adds another dimension to the mystery. Somchai was not alone in seeing glowing spheres beneath the surface before they rose. Other fishermen described the same experience, watching lights emerge from depths that should be too dark and murky for visibility. These underwater sightings suggest the phenomenon begins well below the surface, that whatever generates these lights exists in the river itself rather than at the waterline. Some witnesses described the underwater orbs moving horizontally before ascending, traveling along the river or through the water column with apparent purpose. This directed movement distinguishes them from random pockets of gas, which would simply rise directly to the surface following buoyancy. The lights seem to gather, to congregate in specific areas before beginning their upward journey. This behavior implies organization, pattern, perhaps even intention, though attributing consciousness to unexplained lights ventures into speculation. The question that haunts researchers is simple, but profound. Why here? Why the Mekong? The river is remarkable in many ways, flowing through diverse ecosystems and supporting millions of people, but it is not unique in its chemistry or geology. Other major river systems share similar characteristics without producing reports of glowing orbs. Something about this specific waterway, something we have not yet identified, creates conditions for this phenomenon to occur across hundreds of kilometers and multiple national borders. Perhaps the answer lies in the river's depth, in unexplored sections where pressure and temperature create unique conditions. Perhaps it relates to mineral content, to specific combinations of elements dissolved in the water over millennia. Perhaps it connects to underground geological features, to volcanic activity or tectonic processes occurring beneath the riverbed. Or perhaps, as the village elders believe, it represents something beyond current scientific understanding, a phenomenon that will require new frameworks to comprehend. The geographic spread of the sightings suggests this is not a hoax or misidentification confined to a single location. The consistency of descriptions across isolated communities implies genuine phenomenon rather than coordinated fabrication. These witnesses share nothing but the river itself, separated by language and culture, yet their accounts align with remarkable precision. They describe the same lights, the same behavior, the same inexplicable beauty rising from dark water into darker sky. Standing on the banks of the Mekong at midnight, far from festival grounds and tourist crowds, you might witness what countless others have seen. The glowing orbs rising in silence, the underwater lights pulsing in the depths, the mystery that refuses explanation. The Naga Fireballs are not confined to one celebrated stretch of river. They belong to the Mekong itself, to its entire vast length, appearing wherever the water runs deep, and those who know the river best keep their vigil in the darkness. The river flows on, just as it has for millennia, carrying its secrets through the darkness. Every October, as the full moon rises over the Mekong, thousands gather along the banks with cameras, phones, and eyes wide with anticipation. They come from Bangkok and Beijing, from London and Los Angeles, drawn by something they cannot name. They stand in the humid night air, scanning the black waters, waiting for lights that modern science still cannot explain. Despite decades of investigation, despite military analysis and documentary crews, despite thermal imaging and spectrographic analysis, the Naga Fireballs remain stubbornly, magnificently unexplained. Why only in October? This question haunts every researcher who has studied the phenomenon. The fireballs appear with clockwork precision during the end of Buddhist Lent, rising from the waters as if answering some ancient calendar written long before humans walked these shores. Scientists have measured water temperatures, tracked monsoon patterns, analyzed atmospheric conditions spanning decades. Nothing in the data explains why these lights refuse to appear in January, or May, or August. Only October. Only during those specific nights when the moon hangs full and heavy over the river. What triggers their appearance? Methane deposits exist in riverbeds worldwide, yet nowhere else does this phenomenon occur with such consistency and spectacle. Phosphine gases can create spontaneous combustion, but not in these colors, not with this behavior, not rising hundreds of feet into the air before vanishing without smoke or residue. Bioluminescent organisms cannot survive in freshwater, cannot generate lights visible from miles away, cannot produce the intense reds and oranges that witnesses describe year after year. The Thai military conducted formal investigations in 2002. They deployed scientific equipment along the riverbank, measuring electromagnetic fields, radiation levels, gas compositions. They found nothing conclusive. The lights appeared that year as always, rising through the air while instruments registered data that led nowhere, explained nothing. The investigation closed with more questions than answers. Why has no one ever captured one for analysis? In an age where we have photographed atoms and mapped distant galaxies, these lights remain untouched, unsampled, unknown. They rise from the water and vanish into the air, leaving no trace, no residue, no physical evidence of their existence beyond the testimony of thousands who have witnessed them. Boats have pursued them, only to find empty river. Nets have been cast where lights were seen moments before, pulling up nothing but water and silt. Some phenomena, it seems, resist explanation. They exist in that uncomfortable space between the natural and the supernatural, defying the categories we use to organize reality. The Naga Fireballs do not care about our need for answers. They appear, they rise, they vanish, indifferent to our instruments and our theories. And still, people come. Every year the crowds grow larger. They line the banks at Nong Khai and Phan Phisai, at Pak and Geum across the border in Laos. They come despite the lack of guarantees, despite the possibility of seeing nothing. Or, perhaps because of it. In a world where everything seems explained, documented, cataloged, there is something magnetic about genuine mystery. The dark waters of the Mekong flow endlessly through the night, keeping their secrets close. Somewhere beneath the surface, in depths where light does not reach and instruments cannot measure, something stirs. And when the conditions align in ways we do not understand, following patterns we cannot predict, it sends its mysterious lights into the sky, reminding us that some questions have no answers, and some mysteries are meant to endure. That's where this journey ends for tonight. If you made it all the way here, subscribe and hit the bell for more long-form stories like this. Check out the videos on screen for more right now. Drop your own experiences in the comments below. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.